You keep meeting different faces, but somehow the feeling is always painfully familiar. At first it looks like chemistry, timing, hope, maybe even destiny finally getting your name right. Then the pattern returns so quietly you almost miss it until it hurts again. They feel exciting in the beginning, but eventually you feel unseen, anxious, or emotionally alone. And the strangest part is that some part of you saw it early. You noticed the inconsistency, the distance, the mixed signals, the little moments that felt off. But you stayed curious instead of cautious because the connection felt emotionally loaded. That is usually where the pattern starts, not with them, but with recognition. Not healthy recognition. Familiar recognition. A lot of people do not attract what is good for them first. They attract what feels emotionally recognizable, even when it slowly drains them. Because your nervous system does not automatically chase peace. It often chases what it already understands. If love once felt confusing, distant, conditional, or unpredictable, your body may memorize that rhythm. Then years later, when someone carries that same emotional weather, something inside you lights up. Not because they are right for you, because they are known. And what is known can feel safer than what is truly safe. That is why the same kind of person can walk into your life wearing different names, different voice, different city, same wound. You tell yourself this one is more mature, more self-aware, more serious than the last. But underneath the details, the dynamic feels strangely unchanged. You are still guessing what they mean, still overanalyzing their silence, still calling your intuition insecurity because you want the story to work. This pattern usually does not begin in dating. It begins much earlier, in the emotional atmosphere that taught you what closeness meant. Maybe love in your childhood was present, but emotionally unavailable. Maybe you were cared for, but not deeply understood. Maybe affection came with mood swings, criticism, pressure, or the feeling that you had to earn softness. So you adapted. You learned to read rooms before entering them. You learned to listen for tone changes like weather alerts. You learned how to become pleasing, useful, calm, funny, easy, or low maintenance. And those survival skills can look impressive when you grow up. People call you thoughtful, emotionally intelligent, mature, patient, understanding, even rare. But sometimes what they are really admiring is how well you learned to self-abandon. Because when your early life teaches you to manage other people's emotions, you stop asking harder questions. Questions like whether someone is actually good for you, whether they feel safe, whether you can fully exhale around them, whether love with them costs too much of yourself. Instead, you become skilled at tolerating emotional confusion without immediately walking away. That tolerance becomes attraction more often than people realize. You may call it depth. You may call it chemistry. You may call it potential. But sometimes, it is just the old ache-wearing expensive language. That is why the same type of person keeps finding you. The emotionally unavailable one who opens up just enough to keep you invested. The charismatic one who makes you feel chosen, then suddenly hard to hold. The wounded one who feels deep, but never stable. The inconsistent one who gives intense moments instead of steady care. The self-focused one who loves being understood but never really studies you back. The avoidant one who seems peaceful until closeness asks something real from them. And if you are deeply empathetic, this becomes even harder to catch. Because you can see the hurt underneath their behavior. You can understand why they shut down, pull away, get defensive, or send mixed signals. You can feel their fear before they ever name it. And that ability is powerful. But it can also become dangerous when empathy replaces discernment. Understanding someone is not the same as being safe with them. Explaining their behavior does not reduce its impact on your life. A painful pattern survives by convincing you that compassion should override reality. So instead of leaving, you keep translating. You translate coldness into stress. You translate distance into fear. You translate neglect into a hard season. You translate your loneliness into patience. And the relationship slowly becomes a full-time emotional decoding job. Meanwhile, your own needs start sounding dramatic in your own head. You become careful with your disappointment, careful with your expectations, careful with your truth. Because somewhere inside you still fear that honesty might cost you connection. So you stay flexible. You stay understanding. You stay available. And you call it love while your body calls it exhaustion. This is why the same pattern can follow smart people for years. It has very little to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with emotional imprinting. Your mind may know what red flags look like, but your body often responds before your logic gets a turn. That is why some people feel magnetic to you immediately. They activate an old emotional script. The script says work harder. The script says prove your worth gently. The script says if they finally choose you, something ancient will heal. But what usually happens is the opposite. The old wound does not heal. It gets reopened with newer details. And that can feel especially confusing if the relationship also has real tenderness. Because these patterns are rarely all bad. That is what makes them sticky. There are beautiful conversations, strong eye contact, late-night vulnerability, moments that feel almost sacred. Just enough closeness to keep hope alive. Just enough distance to keep you chasing. Just enough pain to make the good moments feel more meaningful than they are. That cycle can feel intense, and intensity is often mistaken for depth. But calm love usually does not beg for interpretation every other day. Real care does not keep you trapped in emotional detective work. Real connection does not punish you for having needs. It does not make you feel grateful for basic consideration. And it definitely does not require you to abandon your nervous system to stay connected. Look at how this shows up in ordinary moments. You send a thoughtful text and stare at your phone longer than you want to admit. They reply warmly one day, then disappear into vague busyness for 3. You tell yourself not to overthink it, but your chest already knows the pattern. At work, you seem composed, but your focus keeps slipping back to their inconsistency. With friends, you defend them using details no one asked for. At night, you replay conversations like they contain hidden instructions for earning peace. You start shrinking your standards so the situation can still look promising. You call it being realistic. But deep down, you know you are negotiating against your own clarity. Sometimes the pattern is not dramatic at all. Sometimes it is quiet. It is choosing people who feel familiar because they need very little from you emotionally. People who let you perform closeness without actually building it. People who like your softness but never make room for your complexity. People who enjoy your presence but cannot meet your depth without stepping back. That kind of loneliness is especially brutal because technically you are not alone. But emotionally, you keep disappearing in plain sight. And after enough repetition, something dangerous can happen. You begin to think this is just your type. You begin to think this is all attraction is supposed to feel like. You begin to think wanting consistency means you are boring, needy, or unrealistic. That belief can trap you for years. Not because you cannot choose differently. Because healthy love may feel unfamiliar enough to seem emotionally flat at first. Someone stable may not activate your old urgency. They might answer clearly. They might show up consistently. They might speak with warmth that does not disappear the second things get real. And instead of feeling thrilled, you might feel confused. Maybe even a little restless. Because peace can feel unfamiliar when your heart learned connection through uncertainty. This is the part nobody romanticizes. Healing your patterns can feel emotionally boring before it feels beautiful. It can feel suspicious. It can feel anticlimactic. It can feel like there is no spark when actually there is no alarm. That difference matters more than most people realize. So how do you stop attracting the same type of person? You stop feeding the same emotional pattern inside yourself. That does not mean blaming yourself for who approaches you. Certain people will always be drawn to warmth, empathy, depth, and emotional availability. But the real change happens in who gets access to you. Who gets a second chance? Who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets to stay after your body starts whispering that something is off? The first shift is learning to trust discomfort without immediately arguing with it. Not every uncomfortable feeling means fear of intimacy. Sometimes discomfort is wisdom arriving before your mind is ready to accept it. Pay attention to what happens in your body after interactions, not just during the exciting parts. Notice whether you feel grounded or dysregulated. Notice whether you feel expanded or slightly erased. Notice whether you feel safe enough to be honest without rehearsing everything first. Your body keeps a more honest record than your fantasies do. The second shift is getting brutally honest about what you call chemistry. Does this person feel good, or do they feel familiar? Do you like who they are, Or do you like who you become while chasing them? Are you actually connected or just activated? That question alone can change your life. The third shift is grieving the love story you have been trying to rewrite. Because many people are not chasing a person. They are chasing a different ending to an old emotional experience. They want the distant one to stay, the inconsistent one to choose them, the confusing one to finally become clear, the hard one to become easy. And when that does not happen, the pain feels much older than the relationship itself. That is why moving on can feel so disproportionate. You are not just leaving a person. You are leaving a private hope you may have carried since childhood. A hope that if you love well enough, someone difficult will finally love you safely. That hope deserves compassion, but it should not keep running your life. Because healing does not come from winning over familiar pain. It comes from no longer auditioning for care. It comes from noticing when you start over-functioning emotionally and stepping back instead. It comes from letting people reveal their capacity without helping them fake one. It comes from asking simpler questions. Do I feel respected here? Do I feel calm here? Do I feel wanted in ways that do not leave bruises? Do I have to earn basic clarity? Can I be fully honest without fear of emotional punishment? These questions are not unromantic. They are protective. They stop you from confusing emotional labor with love. They stop you from building castles out of crumbs and calling it hope. And little by little, your attractions begin to change. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But noticeably. You start noticing red flags sooner, not because you became cold, but because you became honest. You stop chasing potential when reality is already speaking clearly. You stop romanticizing intensity that leaves you depleted. You stop mistaking emotional unavailability for mystery. And something surprising happens when that shift becomes real. You do not just choose different people. You become harder for the wrong ones to stay around. Because your energy changes. Your boundaries stop sounding apologetic. Your silence stops being an invitation for confusion. Your warmth no longer comes with unlimited access. And that is when healthier love starts recognizing you too. Not because you became perfect, because you became available to what is actually reciprocal. That kind of love may not flood your system with panic and obsession. It may arrive quietly. It may feel steady before it feels cinematic. It may look like someone whose presence does not force you to abandon yourself. And if you're used to chaos, that might feel almost unreal. But real love often does. It is strange at first to be met without being tested. It is strange to be chosen without performing. It is strange to speak plainly and not fear withdrawal. It is strange to feel peace and not mistake it for emptiness. But that strangeness is not a warning. Sometimes it is the beginning of finally experiencing something your old patterns never taught you. So if the same type keeps finding you, do not rush to shame yourself. Look deeper. Patterns are not proof that you are broken. They are proof that something in you is still trying to solve an older pain. And once you understand that, the pattern starts losing power. Because now you can see it before you call it fate. Now you can feel the difference between being pulled in and being cared for. Now you can stop handing your heart to people who only know how to visit it. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. And the moment you stop calling survival chemistry, your whole love life begins to change. Not all at once, but enough to finally recognize this truth when it arrives. The right connection will not feel like a puzzle punishing you for wanting peace. It will feel like relief you no longer have to earn.